In a lush but suffocating corner of the Caribbean, where verdant greenery strangles every breath of air and the humidity presses on the soul like a vice, a man schemes. Fred, an unscrupulous developer, stands poised on the precipice of his own undoing, blind to the sharp edge of the abyss beneath him. His world is an unrelenting tangle of avarice and manipulation, where progress is measured not by virtue, but in conquest, no matter how hollow. Fred's grand ambition, a luxury resort carved from the swampy, unyielding land, is both his vision and his delusion. But the land resists, and its hostility mirrors the resistance he feels from the local community, a subtle but palpable force that grows heavier with each passing day. Against this backdrop, he encounters Margot, a wealthy heiress with a cold elegance that masks as an inner hunger for connection. She is his salvation, or so he convinces himself, a financier and partner who might transform his dreams into reality. But Margot's love is a fortress, and Fred, with all his charm and cunning, can only scale its walls by force. Desperation leads him to his ex-girlfriend, a local woman versed in the old ways, a purveyor of secrets whispered between the living and the dead. Her home, shadowed and pungent with the smell of soil and death, offers Fred a solution, a love potion that will secure Margot's affections. The exchange is conducted with quiet inevitability, as if the transaction had been fated long before Fred stepped into her orbit, with a thinly veiled warning, beware the price. The ex-girlfriend hands over a vial of green liquid, the weight of which Fred underestimates entirely. Margot succumbs, as planned, her icy demeanor melting into an unnatural ardor, but her love, distilled and potent, soon ferments into something grotesque. What Fred sought was control. What he receives is bondage. Margot's obsession festers, consuming her until it no longer resembles love, but a kind of parasitic existence. Her devotion as suffocating as the swamp itself, her death, abrupt and jarring, offers no reprieve. The burial is meant to be a severance, but it is only the beginning. Margot returns, her decayed visage a horrifying reflection of Fred's arrogance. She's unrelenting in her love, cloying, grotesque, and eternal. Her presence is a reminder of the irrevocable consequences of tampering with forces beyond comprehension, and Fred's life spirals into a waking nightmare. As the swamp closes in around them, Fred becomes ensnared in his own creation. Margot is everywhere, in the shadows, in her dreams. The oppressive landscape mirrors his internal torment, a labyrinth of his own making, where escape is not an option. In the final moments, Fred is seen not as a man, but as a husk, trapped, suffocated, consumed by the very desires he sought to fulfill. The story concludes not with a resolution, but with stagnation, a grim tableau of eternal entrapment. In the distance, the swamp hums with life, indifferent to the man swallowed whole by his own ambition. Fred embodies the colonizer's arrogance. His plan to tame the swamp and transform it into a lucrative plantation mirrors historical patterns in the Caribbean, where fertile land becomes a theater of exploitation, like those who drained marshes to plant sugarcane. Fred views the swamp as both an obstacle and a prize, blind to the cultural and ecological violence his ambition entails. His character invites an interrogation of the forces that drive men to control what cannot or should not be controlled. Fred's vision of the swamp as a malleable resource is emblematic of colonial attitudes towards the Caribbean. The region's history is littered with figures who believe the land existed solely for their benefit, from the sugar barons of the 17th century to modern developers peddling eco-tourism. Frantz Fanon in The Wretched of the Earth argued that colonialism transforms the land into a battleground, where native ecosystems and cultures are subordinated to external demands. Fred's plantation project replicates this violent dynamic, as he bulldozes through both the swamp's ecology and Margot's agency. The swamp retaliates not with the immediacy of human rebellion, but with the slow inescapable weight of inevitability. It absorbs Fred's greed and amplifies it, using his own tools of manipulation, represented by the love potion, to turn his desires against him. The swamp, like Fanon's colonized subject, asserts itself in ways that disrupt Fred's illusion of control. Margot's zombified return becomes the swamp's act of retribution, a grotesque reminder of the cost of his ambitions. Fred's use of the love potion to secure Margot's affection is a profound violation of Kant's categorical imperative. Never treat another person as a means to an end. Fred reduces Margot to an object of desire, stripping her of autonomy in pursuit of his own goals. This moral transgression is compounded when Margot's free will is not merely suppressed but annihilated, leaving her a vessel of Fred's obsession. The zombified Margot is both a punishment and a mirror. She reflects Fred's moral decay, embodying his attempt to commodify love and reduce human connection to a transaction. This critique extends beyond the episode, paralleling modern phenomenon such as the commodification of intimacy in dating apps and the exploitation of emotional labor in relationships. In both cases, the ethical boundaries of human interaction are eroded by the pressures of commodification. For Deleuze and Guattari, desire is not a lack to be filled, but a productive force, a constant motion that resists containment. Fred, however, embodies the destructive side of desire, the compulsion to possess and dominate. His fixation on Margot as an object of love rather than a subject with her own agency transforms his desire into a closed circuit of obsession. The love potion symbolizes this reduction, collapsing the complexity of human emotion into a singular, oppressive outcome. Margot's zombification disrupts the circuit. In her undead state, she deterritorializes Fred's desires, turning them into a source of horror and revulsion. Her reterritorialization as a grotesque partner forces Fred to confront the futility of his ambitions. This dynamic parallels colonial enterprises, where the desire to control land and people often spirals into chaos and resistance. The swamp, like Deleuze and Guattari's desiring machines, defies simplification and subjugation, asserting its own chaotic logic against Fred's orderly plans. Margot's zombification serves as an unsettling intersection of life and death, embodying Freud's concept of the death drive. Her return as a soulless yet animated being disrupts the natural order, challenging Fred's ability to reconcile his actions with their consequences. Freud theorized that the death drive compels individuals towards self-destruction, often masked by obsessive behavior. Fred's insistence on controlling Margot, even at the cost of her humanity, illustrates this dynamic perfectly. The swamp becomes an external manifestation of this death drive, a space where Fred's desires are consumed and mirrored back to him in grotesque forms. Margot's uncanny existence as a zombie destabilizes Fred's perception of reality, aligning with Freud's exploration of the uncanny as that which is simultaneously familiar and alien. Her presence is a reminder of the boundary Fred has crossed, a boundary not just between life and death, but between moral action and irredeemable corruption. Returning to Deleuze and Guattari's critique of desire, the swamp emerges as a space of anti-Oedipal resistance. While Fred operates within an Oedipal framework seeking to control and possess, Margot's zombified state disrupts his patriarchal narrative. The swamp resists being coded as a resource, its chaotic vitality undermining Fred's attempts to impose linear progression. Deleuze and Guattari would describe the swamp as a site of deterritorialization, where established systems of power are broken down. Fred's journey reflects the failure of territorialization, his plantation dream collapsing under the weight of the swamp's unruly logic. Margot's transformation signifies a new flow of desire, one that escapes Fred's grasp and redefines her existence beyond his control. We can view Fred's desire as a destructive cycle. His obsession with Margot and the swamp represents a misdirected flow of desire, one that seeks to impose hierarchical structures on spaces and beings that resist them. The swamp, as a deterritorialized zone, exists outside Fred's constructed reality, It cannot be tamed or mapped, a chaotic force that devours all attempts at control. Deleuze and Guattari would argue that Fred's fixation on control stems from a neurotic need to territorialize the untamable, a reflection of capitalist and colonial mindsets that view every space and relationship as conquerable. Fred's plantation dream mirrors the modern capitalist practice of branding and commodifying the uncommodifiable. From the exploitation of indigenous spiritual practices to the commercialization of natural landscapes, the drive to territorialize and monetize persists today. The swamp, in resisting Fred's intrusion, becomes a symbol of untamable space that defies commodification. The aesthetic of decay permeates the episode, with Fred's failed plantation serving as a modern Gothic ruin. This imagery evokes the haunted landscapes of colonial estates where the ghosts of the past linger in crumbling facades and overgrown gardens. The swamp's reclamation of Fred's plantation is not merely physical, but symbolic. A rejection of his attempts to impose permanence on an impermanent world. The episode's use of zombification ties into broader cultural myths about the undead, particularly as they relate to colonial histories. Zombification, rooted in Haitian voodoo, represents not only the fear of death, but also the fear of enslavement and dehumanization. Fred's use of the love potion echoes colonial power's use of cultural erasure and forced labor, turning Margot into a literal embodiment of his desires. Zombification in the Caribbean context has been explored by scholars like Joan Dayan, who argues that it reflects the trauma of enslavement and the loss of agency. Margot's zombified state, while a plot device, carries the weight of this allegory, tying her individual tragedy to the broader history of exploitation in the region. And so, we leave the swamp, though it does not leave us. The air hangs heavy, dense with the sickly sweetness of decay and the faint echo of whispers unheard. Fred's tale, entangled in the roots of greed and obsession, is not his alone, but ours as well. A collective narrative of what it means to covet, to claim, to conquer. The swamp's tendrils, unseen but ever-reaching, linger in the corners of our thoughts, a reminder of the boundaries we believe we can cross without consequence. The plantation lies abandoned now, swallowed whole by the indifference of nature. Margot's footsteps fade into the mire, where Fred's dreams dissolve like mist over stagnant waters. Yet, something stirs in the shadows. A ripple, a murmur, a suggestion that the story is not truly over but merely paused, waiting. And as we turn away, retreating from this verdant abyss, we cannot help but wonder, was the swamp ever the monster? Or was it simply a reflection of a murky mirror showing us what we have always refused to see? The questions remain unanswered, suspended in the damp, oppressive air, as the swamp closes its mouth around them, leaving only stillness behind. I'll see you next week, friends. Watch this video next.